Good evening, folks, and welcome to another episode of Disguised Coverage, part of the Cover One Sports Network. I am your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on the old Twitter at ant. That's pro, two underscores, ANT. Give me a follow on the old Twitter, or if follows aren't your thing, that's completely fine. I will gladly accept any one of the 7 Dragon Balls as a substitute. So whichever is easier for you to give a follow on Twitter or one of the 7 Dragon Balls, either the Namekian version or Earth's version. I'm fine either way. So whichever one's easier for you to give, one of the 7 Dragon Balls or a follow. I'm pretty easy like that. So whichever, you're down for. Speaking of being down for, I am very much down for fantasy football this season. And as you know, Cover One, we have partnered with Underdog Fantasy, one of the best apps and sites when it comes to daily fantasy, best ball, player prop parlays, a whole bunch of stuff, anything and everything related to the game and fantasy football aspect. And we're extremely excited at Cover One to announce, as we have multiple times on the show and other shows on Cover One, that if you download the Underdog Fantasy app, when you do that and you use the promo code Cover One, that's Cover One, all one word, cover, and then the number 1, you get $25 free with a $10 minimum deposit. So do a $10 minimum deposit, get yourself a free $25. That's a pretty good deal, pretty good value, especially for something as awesome as fantasy football. And we're extremely proud of that partnership that we have going. Also, what we are extremely proud of is our interaction and engagement with you, the fans, the listeners, the watchers. We are extremely grateful and appreciative for all the support we've received this offseason. You guys mean a lot to us. And we're going to get started with tonight's episode titled Buffalo Bills Training Camp Competitions. And this episode, as I would have hoped you would have guessed, is about several of the training camp competitions we spoke about leading up to this offseason when it came to several positions that some were high profile, some a little less so, but the battles and the competitions that we're going to see amongst several positions. We've spoken about it at length as this offseason has progressed. We spoke about it in last week's episode. What's up, Apex? I appreciate you. We spoke about it in last week's episode, talking about, training camp kickoff and what was going to develop and who was looking like what and who was doing what and how these camp competitions were going to progress. And last week's episode, when it debuted on Thursday night, we'd only had a couple training camps, days, practices under our belts. And now at this point, we've had a substantial amount. We've had almost a full week's worth. There's been a couple off days in between. We've had an open practice, which I went to. We're going to get into some of that tonight. We've had a padded practice or two. We've had legitimate competition. Now we're starting to see referees trickle into practice. So we're going to get a little more legitimacy when it comes to the physicality and the pads coming on and calls and who's going to be able to get away with what. So as we discussed last week, things are really starting to pick up when it comes to the NFL offseason. We are, again, in my mind, and maybe subjective, a little arbitrary, but once training camp starts, NFL season is officially underway. As I sent out for the tweet for the promo for this episode a couple of minutes ago, the Hall of Fame game is tonight, so it's the first official preseason game, so it's the first real NFL action that we're going to see. There is a lot going on starting now for so many teams. And as we start to get closer to the Bills' first preseason game, which is coming up next week, these camp competitions are going to be even more important. And I see everybody starting to come through in the chat. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you guys coming through and saying what's up. So it's important to see these competitions. And those competitions, it may seem obvious, but we'll say it. Those camp competitions will lead into who gets more playing time and what type of playing time in the preseason games, and the performance in those preseason games and the snaps in those preseason games will go a very long way towards determining what the Bills' final roster looks like come the 2021 regular season. And as stated multiple times on the show, this is one of the best years for the Buffalo Bills in very recent memory, and I wouldn't even say recent memory, in a very long time. This Bills team has so much depth. They have so much talent. And what's cool and exciting is to see that these camp competitions that the Bills are going to have. I'm not pulling up Greg's comment. It almost threw me off my game, but I appreciate you, Greg. Thank you so much for joining in the chat. These camp competitions are legitimate this year for this Bills team because of the talent on the roster, because of the depth. This isn't just like, well, these two guys are fighting out, are battling it out for this position, but they're both not great. So whoever wins, hooray, I guess. there's legit talent on this team. And the guys that the Bills are going to be cutting and the guys that won't make this team are legitimate NFL players. Even just take Dean Marlowe, for example. He's been referenced a lot in terms of the safety depth that the Bills will be lacking this year because he left and went to Detroit. So now it's like Damar Hamlin and Jaquan Johnson, or, maybe Josh Thomas or Tariq Thompson or someone else emerges. But Dean Marlowe sat on the bench behind Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer and was a really quality piece. And now he goes to Detroit, where he's going to see even more snaps, legitimate defensive snaps. That was a guy who was just, kicking around as like the third, fourth string safety, would come in every now and again on some sub packages, fill in if somebody was hurt. This Bills team, since Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane have taken over, have really revamped everything. There's talent from top to bottom. So there is no shortage of legitimate competition at a lot of these positions when it comes to this team. And when you add that in with the high hopes and expectations that the Bills have for this year, these camp competitions and these battles are all the more important, are all the more meaningful. And we're going to start with, I don't want to say the most meaningful. I think a lot of these competitions have equal value to me in some way, shape, or form, because the drama is different, the story is different, the importance and level of impact is different. But we're going to start with the defensive line, seeing as how the Buffalo Bills in the draft went back-to-back. They double-dipped with their first two picks. They took Gregory Rousseau in the first round. They took Carlos Basham in the second round. If you technically added in with A.J. Epinesa last year, who was, the Bills' first-round pick, even though he was taken in the second round, the Bills have gone heavy with the defensive line in the front of the draft, in the front parts of the draft, day one and day two, these last several years. And what was interesting about the defensive line and what's been going on is, Jerry Hughes came into camp when it started with a calf injury, so he has not participated. And while that sucks for Jerry, knock on wood, hopefully he's ready to go by week one. I still think that I'm going to say this every episode, and I know there's some people who love to get into the comments on YouTube and talk about how Jerry Hughes is terrible. Jerry Hughes is still our most proven and best pass rusher, and he does a lot for this team. And I'm still to this day amazed at the hate and the slander that is slung towards Jerry Hughes. I don't understand it. And to each his own. Everybody has an opinion, and you are, entitled to have your own. But for all the people who just come and like, oh, well, look at his sacks. He only had this many sacks. He had like a handful of sacks. He sucks. Pressures aren't worth anything. Please stop. That take is tired, and that take is inaccurate. And it woefully ignores the larger contextual picture that is Jerry Hughes and the pass rush win rate. I don't want to go off into a tangent on Jerry Hughes, but Jerry Hughes slander is not tolerated here. Do yourself a favor, look into the advanced metrics, or if you could get your hands on some tape or some film, whether it's on your own or from, I don't know, the folks at Cover One, breaking down awesome guys like Jerry Hughes, you'll see the real contributions that he makes to this team. But anyway, I digress. Jerry Hughes has missed training camp so far with a calf strain, but the beneficiaries of Jerry Hughes missing time have been the young guys. And, actually, before I get into that, I see the comments in the chat starting to blow up. Same thing as the last several weeks. I'm going to try and bring up things as I go along, as I can, as I see if they tie in and go whatever. But worst case scenario, I always try to get back to any and every comment, question, thought, concern at the end of the episode. As I mentioned, I was at Bill's open practice last Saturday. Feel free to throw any questions or anything you got my way. If you have any questions on anything or anything I saw, whether you saw me tweet stuff or just questions in general that you had, in addition to anything that's mentioned on the episode or anything that's going on in general, throw it into the chat. I love the engagement on anything, questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, ideologies, philosophies, maxims, theorems, anything and everything. Send them in there. I'll get to them as best as I can and as much as I can. But again, I digress. I'm digressing a lot here. So Jerry Hughes has been out, and that's allowed the younger guys, A.J. Epinesa, Gregory Rousseau, and Carlos Basham to see more snaps. And as I mentioned, being at the Bills open practice last Saturday, one of the major things I noticed was the defensive line rotation, especially at edge, when it came to the ones playing against each other. So the first team defense, Gregory Rousseau was pretty firmly entrenched at an edge spot almost every time the ones went out there, whether it was team on team or they were running, just defense only drills on one side of the field while the offense was running something against air on the other side. Gregory Rousseau saw a lot of first-team snaps. And on the other side, A.J. Epinesa saw a lot of first-team snaps. Not as much as Rousseau did, but still saw first-team snaps. And we've heard the praise. We've heard the rumblings. We've seen the reports how much these two guys have killed it. And that's where we're going to start when we talk about the defensive line. I want to talk about A.J. Epinesa and Gregory Rousseau. And even from, not even just from the media perspective, but from what Mario Addison said. If you didn't get to see what Mario Addison said, do yourself a favor, whether it's on YouTube, Twitter, or whatever social media, just type in Mario Addison in training camp and you'll see him gush about Gregory Rousseau and A.J. Epinesa and Carlos Basham as well. But it was great to see the perspective from Addison, a guy in the trenches, no pun intended, with those guys, and an actual player who's seeing what's going on and just, separate from the media, someone who doesn't have as much of an agenda as the media. But Addison gushed about both of them, and it's really backed up in the reports that you read and what I personally saw. Granted, small sample size, only one practice, but we'll start with A.J. Epinesa. He looked great last Saturday at open practice. And again, it connects with everything we've heard so far, but all the way back towards minicamp when Sean McDermott talked about how, the shape that A.J. Epinesa showed up in and what he's done and what he's looked like. And McDermott continued to talk about that. We spoke about Epinesa over the last several practices in training camp and said, I thought it, quote unquote, I thought it got off on the right foot when he came back here as early as he did in the offseason. You're seeing the fruits of his labor to this point, close quote. I mentioned this during the offseason. I mentioned it during the season last year. I don't think it could be overstated, the work that A.J. Epinesa put in last year. And to put it into just the perspective of it, so you got a guy who's a rookie, a second-round pick, in a COVID offseason, just a bunch of chaos. Nobody has ever encountered something like this before. He's not getting the face-to-face time and the in-person work and coaching and learning that he should be having. And in the midst of all that, in addition to worrying about just general safety and health guidelines and protocols and all these things, the dude completely transforms his body in the NFL during the season to adapt to the role that the Bills want him to play and to be better suited to fit this defense and fit the NFL. He was much bigger in college, and he comes in and dedicates himself to the point, again, to drop as much weight as he did, as fast as he did, and have it not just leave him a shriveling mess, is a testament to his focus, his drive, his work ethic. And then when you add it in with how we started to show towards the end of the year, there were a lot of positive things clicking and looking, bright for A.J. Epinesa in this upcoming season. Ooh, and I love the comment here from Ron. Epinesa is going to be the biggest steal of the 2020 draft. That would be fantastic. That would be fantastic. And you know what? With the way he's trending right now, that's a bold statement, but I could go for that. And awesome comment here for T Dobbs. Also, I love cats. I think I mention this every time you comment, so I love that your icon is an adorable cat. AJ apparently looked great today. He did. Yeah, he had another great practice. He was one of the biggest flashers for me last Saturday. And again, it added up almost, in step with the reports that have come out from camp so far. The way he's using his hands, the technique that he's playing with. He had a real beautiful rush that Greg Thompson tweeted a video of from last Saturday where, granted, it was against Bobby Hart, but he took a beautiful outside angle to Bobby Hart's outside shoulder, attacked that shoulder, got upfield so quickly, extended his arm so quickly, push and pulled, just picture perfect. And I don't care if it's against the 50th string tackle or the first string tackle, pulling a move off that pristinely and that picture perfect in the NFL is a hard thing to do, regardless of who you are or who you're going against. And it was beautiful. And that's something that, again, tracks with what he did in college and what he did towards the back end of 2020, the hand technique, the arm technique, the punch and the jab, the extension, the quickness upfield, the plan that he started to attack with, and the mentality combined with the technique. And that's what you've heard from some of the reports as well. As we start to get into Gregory Rousseau a little bit, obviously it's the physical measurables and the length and the height and the size and the stature and all those things, which is to be expected. But with A.J. Epinesa, it's been more of the technique that he's playing with and the technical side of his game that has really improved. And that was very much on display in person last Saturday. And he's someone who I am Good comment here from Griff. Mario was hyping that push-pull too. Yeah, he did. Actually, no, I don't know. I don't remember if Mario did, but good catch, good call. I appreciate that. The push-pull was beautiful, and it's something that, oh, man, I appreciate your job. Sorry, I pour one out for your kitty. I lost a kitty a couple years back too, so I appreciate you. It sucks. I'm super pumped for AJ Epinesa to get preseason action. I want to see him in more live snaps. I want to see the pads get put on. I want to see what he looks like regularly. And we're going to see it in a little over a week. Just the rave reviews that he's received. And again, I want to put it into perspective, not just for this year, but for the upcoming years. Mario Addison and Jerry Hughes, we don't know what their status will be next year when it comes to the Buffalo Bills. We don't know if Jerry will be back. We don't know if Mario Addison will be back. So in an ideal world, and not even in an ideal world, well, in an ideal world, Epinesa, Rousseau, and Basham do very well and are the future and are the truth at edge. But even in a realistic world, those three are probably what we're hanging our hat on when it comes to edge rusher in 2022. And we know how important the defensive line is to the Buffalo Bills, to Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane. We know how important pass rush is in today's NFL. We know how important it is to get pressure, to get after the quarterback, get him off his spot, cause problems for people. So if AJ can be the truth, yeah, Ron, I second that. I can't wait to see him next week as well. If AJ can be that piece, because again, I can mention it, he keeps getting lost in the shuffle as we talk about this offseason. You know, the talk is about Rousseau and Basham and even F.A. Obata a little bit, but AJ didn't really get a lot of coverage until camp started. I really hope he has a big year. I think he'll have a big year. I think he solidifies a starting spot for himself. And if you had seen the Mario Addison video, he spoke a little about Basham and he spoke a little on Rousseau, but what was cool is he went in depth with Rousseau and Basham and talked about like what they're doing or how they're doing. Then they were like, oh, what about AJ Epinesa? And all he did was just like, AJ's ready. Watch out for AJ. That was it. Like all he did was say, AJ is ready. And almost like he was at a loss for words with how good Epinesa had been. And again, you get a lot of positivity coming from minicamp in May, training camp as it starts. There's not really a ton of negative press that comes out as you move towards these things, especially from the beat reporters and the guys who are allowed access at practice. You might see a couple things here and there, but everything was coming up roses for AJ Epinesa, and it seems to continue to be falling in line with that pattern as every single day passes, in addition to what I personally, again, it was one day, small sample size, but what I saw personally, just really impressed with AJ Epinesa. His quickness, his pass rush plan, his technique, the mentality that he was operating with, just, again, piecing things and putting things together in the blink of an eye like he did towards the back end of 2020. That's something that's really tremendous going on this year. And again, it's a position, the defensive line as a whole, but especially edge, it's a dogfight this year. How many guys are the Bills going to keep up front? Traditionally, Greg Thompson and Sal Capaccio talked about it last night on the Cover One Buffalo podcast. The Bills usually haven't kept more than 8 or 9 defensive linemen. So what does that mean for edge this year? Are you keeping 5? Are you keeping 6? Are the Bills going to keep 9 defensive linemen? Are they going to keep 10? Are they going to keep 6 edge rushers or 5? It's hard at that position. And even whoever does make it, the amount of snaps that they're going to receive, the Bills want to do a heavy rotation. They like to keep that front four clean and fresh, and they like to rotate and maintain energy and have situational players for situational plays. So the usage is going to be interesting as well. So just making the final cut doesn't mean you're going to be a significant contributor. So it's a tough position to crack with this edge position and this edge grouping. And Epinesa is somebody who's really shown out and taken advantage, as much as you hate to say it, taken advantage of Jerry Hughes' absence at defensive end, who honestly, though, even if Jerry was there, he's probably getting rest days and maintenance days, because it's not like Jerry Hughes needs a ton of training camp and a ton of one-on-one work. He's sitting there. Ooh, prediction here from Griff, keeping 6 defensive ends, 4 defensive tackles. I like where your head's at. I'm thinking 9 or 10. I know that's probably not like a bold statement. It's kind of more obvious than anything, but I'm still thinking 10, especially if we can get some other things, which we're going to talk about as this episode progresses. Ooh, even bolder from Apex, 7 defensive ends and 3 defensive tackles. Oh boy. Another defensive end, as I alluded to earlier, who's been doing really well, is Gregory Rousseau. I think not even to start with like kind of the corny or the jokier side of things, but we saw the images when Rousseau met McDermott and how much bigger he was than McDermott. We keep seeing all these things of how tall he is, how tall he is, how big he is, how big he is. Seeing him in person last week, ooh, dude is big, like big, even for like NFL standards. Dude is huge. So is Spencer Brown as well. Spencer Brown is a mountain of a man. It is ridiculous. But I've heard a lot of praise for Gregory Rousseau this offseason, how quick he's picking things up. You're hearing a lot of good, positive things and, buzzwords that aren't too buzzwordy from the coaching staff, especially from Leslie Frazier. I loved what he said, leading up to training camp and coming out of mini camp and things about how, you tell Gregory Rousseau something once or you show him something once or teach it to him and he goes out there and he immediately puts it into practice. You don't have to tell him the same thing 2, 3, 4, 5 times in order to get it to stick. He's able to take, learn, translate it, put it into action relatively quickly, which is tremendous for any player, let alone a young player, let alone a player who doesn't have as much game experience and snaps on film and tape like Gregory Rousseau. We all know the deal of how raw he is, that he really only played 1 year, that he used to be a safety, that he opted out last year and didn't have anything for 2020, all these things that created more ambiguity when it came to what kind of prospect and what kind of player he was going to be. It was another almost Josh Allen comparison, but with, I guess, less tape. But that raw aspect of, oh, man, this guy could be amazing, or, oh, man, this guy's going to be a bust and he's going to be terrible and he's going to be off the team. So all the reports, any and every report that you keep seeing about Gregory Rousseau is just the professionalism and the way he operates. And you saw it. Well, I saw it last Saturday. Ooh, the length is impressive. And what's more impressive is the way he's using it. And it may seem small or it may seem stupid, but there's a lot of guys who are blessed with size, who are blessed with talent, who are blessed with God-given ability, and they just do not take advantage of it, whether it's, a lack of honing their craft or a lack of the ability to convert that raw talent into actual action and performance and being able to, have that translate on the field and actually mean something against an opponent. And Rousseau has been doing it regularly, so he's got that length. But again, it would be meaningless if he had all that length and he wasn't using it. He is using it, though. Mario Addison talked about it beautifully. Again, go watch that clip from Mario Addison from training camp from a couple of days ago. Oh, that's a good call there, handsome man. Yeah, Frazier did. He mentioned splash plays. Rousseau is using that length really well. His ability to get that quick punch in. And again, he's going to have the advantage because he's got some of the longest arms in the NFL. He's getting off the ball quick. He's transitioning from, being in his down set position to getting right in on the offensive lineman. And if he's not able to get to the quarterback, he's had multiple sack days, by the way. Well, I mean, sacks as much as you can, since there aren't actually tackling the quarterback, but he's had multiple sack practices so far. And when he's not getting sacks, what's super encouraging is how much. Yeah, Kevin, you are late for the live podcast. How dare you? How dare you, Kevin? No, it's all good. Welcome, Kevin. What's good to see and good to hear about Rousseau is when he's not getting to the quarterback. Again, may sound basic or like it should be done, but he's getting his hands up in the passing lane. He's doing things to make life difficult for the offense and the quarterback. And good comment here from Mr. Diggs. Those characters with intelligence is dangerous. That's part of it. Being able to have the raw talent, the physical measurables, but being able to tie it all together with the mental aspect of it. And again, the getting your hands up and getting in the pass lane, it's such a I want to say a veteran move, but it's something that helps a lot. You saw J.J. Watt do it so much when he was arguably the best defensive player in the NFL for a while. He was either getting to the quarterback, or if he wasn't, he was getting in the throwing lane, knocking passes down, tips, deflections, all of these types of things. So seeing Rousseau already doing that now, early, very early, he is in the legitimate infancy of his career. Seeing him do that already and just hearing, again, the continued praise that he's receiving from coaches, his peers, and even from the media reports as well, seeing him and AJ Epinesa both have, standout practice after standout practice, is really encouraging and really a good sign coming out of camp so far. And one last one who I wanted to talk about on the defensive line, it really just came from how impressed I was in person with him on Saturday. F.A. Obata just, I feel like he didn't lose. I'm probably wrong on this, but I don't think he lost a rep. I don't think he didn't get, like, it seemed like every time he took a rep, he was getting to the quarterback or getting in the backfield. He looked fast. He looked big. He looked long. He looked strong. That rhymes. I'm a poet and I don't even know it, but I can show it. He looked really good. And we keep harping back to that stat from last year. You know, he only played 39% of the snaps for Carolina, but he still came away with 5.5 sacks in 2020. The efficiency that he operated with, it's, and you might be able to see that and be like, well, maybe he got lucky, or, it's the type of numbers that will regress back towards the mean and he won't have that type of efficiency going forward. But the idea was bringing him in. Okay, like, he's very traitsy, and if you can cultivate those traits, you can potentially maximize his ceiling, maximize his worth, and get more production out of him. Seeing what I saw personally last Saturday and what we've seen so far in other clips from camp, and then reading in the reports, he's really clicking on all cylinders to the point that as of right now, he might be a legitimate roster lock, especially with the idea that he can kick inside and play a little bit at defensive tackle, whether in the pass rush or maybe even some rundown situations. He looked really, really, really good. Really good Saturday in the open practice. I like this question. I'm going to come back to it. Remind me of this question. Well, I'll remind myself after I talk about FAO body here. That's a very interesting question. We're going to talk about that. I like that. Well played. And yeah, to Apex's comment here as well. Obata is a name that comes out of every report as a positive daily. Yeah, he just kept flashing. Every time I felt like I would be watching for something else, because it was almost tough. It was like information overload at the open practice, trying to figure out what to watch and who to watch and when. So I was trying to watch different things. I didn't want to hone in on one player or one position grouping too much. And it just seemed like every time I watched him, he was doing something really positive or really good. And even when I wasn't watching F.A. Obata, I would be watching something in the secondary, but then you'd see the flash of the blue jersey, somebody getting into the backfield, and I'd be like, oh, who's that? Oh, it's F.A. Obata again. He just seemed to consistently get into the backfield, make big plays, just, again, quick, fast, athletic, long, big, just everything you really like to see, to the point that he seems like, a solid bet to put your money into that theory or belief that, okay, he had 39% of the snaps in Carolina last year and 5.5 sacks. If 5.5 sacks, if we give him more snap percentage in Buffalo, maybe he turns that into 8, 9, 10 sacks, or maybe at the very least, giving him maybe 45% of the snaps, maybe he kicks that up to 7.5 or 8. And I don't think it's ridiculous to say that. I don't think it's too like homery or Billsy to think that. He's looked really, 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 really good. And I don't know who's looked the best out of those three that we've just discussed, AJ Epinesa, Gregory Rousseau, and F.A. Obata. But the idea that someone is going to get cut from this position grouping, not even just the defensive line as a whole, but from the edge grouping, it's a dogfight. Again, as we mentioned, you've got Jerry Hughes and you've got Mario Addison, you've got Epinesa, and you've got Gregory Rousseau, and you've got Basham, and you've got Obata, and you've still got Taryn Johnson, who has shown some potential on defense, but is also a really quality special teams contributor. It's a very interesting grouping, and this is something that, what's nice with broadcast angles from film when you're not watching the all 22, so you're just watching regular TV, the easiest thing for you to see is the box. It's easiest for you to see the defensive line and the offensive line. You can't really look at a broadcast angle looking at the TV and see what's going on with the safeties or the corners. Really, you can see maybe the corners a little bit, but then they start to drop back and they're out of your screen. The safeties are pretty much never on your screen unless they're coming in around the box. So seeing the defensive line is going to be such an awesome thing for Bills fans this preseason, because you are going to get beautiful, natural views of Epinesa and Rousseau and Basham and Obata and all these guys up front, because the camera's always going to be focused on them because of the natural broadcast angle. So it's going to be a really cool thing to watch, and I'm super pumped for what these guys will do in the preseason, because it's going to go a long way towards determining, again, who makes the final roster and who sees meaningful snaps. And just to be able to see more live aspect of these guys. Because again, it seems we saw multiple comments in the comments here this episode from you guys. Every day it seems like, AJ Epinesa had an amazing day today. Gregory Rousseau had an amazing day today. F.A. Obata had an amazing day today. And it just seems like we continue to have that. Also, where I'm not talking about defensive tackles in this, well, unless somebody comments or has a question like you did here, Ron. I think Ed Oliver's going to have a really good year. I think he had a good year last year and people didn't realize it because he didn't have the numbers, and also because he was getting double teamed a whole heck of a lot. #analysis. Now that Starr is back and there should be more threat from the edge and the outside. I think Ed Oliver is, again, it depends on what you're defining a monster season as, but I think Ed Oliver has a season that has a lot of splash plays and flashes a lot. Ron, we're on the same page there. I want to go back to the question that was asked by Mr. Diggs. Is our defense a top 3 defense this season? Ooh. So I don't know. That's a bold statement, and also depends on what you're defining as like top 3. Are we talking like yards? Are we talking points, or just overall kind of what your feeling or thought is? This was a defense in 2019 that was tremendous. They were a very good, very stout, very strong unit. 2019, Josh Allen was not carrying the Bills like he did in 2020. The offense was not there where it was. Also, really good comment there from Ron. Going to be tough because our offense is so good. That's the part now. So if the Bills offense continues to score and score quickly or just put up points, then at some point, just from the law of averages and the opportunities and the amount of time they're on the field, the Bills defense are going to give up points and yards in some aspect, in some regard. But this was a team in 2019 that was carried by their defense. The defense was tremendous, to the point of I don't like using fantasy football as a metric for real football, but the Bills defense in 2020 in a lot of leagues was the number 1 defense that was taken off the board. As many of you know, I lived in New York City for the past 9 years, back in Buffalo now, but I've done a lot of fantasy football leagues that are with non-Buffalo Bills people. And in a lot of leagues I was in last year, again, especially in New York City, where everybody hates the Bills because they're either Jets fans and they hate the Bills, or they're Giants fans and they still don't like the Bills and think the Bills are a joke. The Bills were the first defense off the board. There were a lot of people, not just from like a football standpoint, but from a fantasy football standpoint, that thought, the Bills are going to be something this year. And they were the number 1 fantasy defense off the board. To some, they underachieved last year. But again, no Star Latulele. You had guys in the secondary missing games due to injury and COVID. We had the injuries to Milano and Tremaine Edmonds. There were a lot of things that went some way sideways for the Bills defense last year, and not to make excuses for them. But at the end of the year, and Aaron Quinn loves to point it out as well, the Bills were a top 10 DVOA defense when the season ended last year. I'm big into DVOA. I love the advanced metrics and the analytics of it. And they were a top 10 defense in DVOA towards the end of the year consistently. So even with all the struggles and the injuries and the horrific play they had last year, they were still a top 10 defense. So is our defense a top 3 defense this year? I think, as a lot of people have mentioned in the comments, they have the potential to be, if some of the pieces click. If Tremaine Edmonds takes a jump, this could easily be a top 5 unit. If Ed Oliver takes a jump, this could easily be a top 5 unit. We've got a lot of potential and a lot of talent that if these guys start to reach their potential and push that ceiling a little bit, we could see a top unit. And if we pair a top defense with what seemingly seems like a top offense, this is going to be a dangerous team. I like this comment here. Vlad mentioned it. Special teams are good, and it came from, Kevin here. We talk about offense and defense, but what about the special teams? That's funny, Griff. Your husband's husband talks about DVOA. Haven't noticed. Aaron does. Yeah, well played. I like the husband's husband reference. That's very good. Bill's special teams should be good. I don't want to kind of like gloss over or sweep past, but the Bills had I'm trying to remember, and I don't have it handy. I'm pretty sure the Bills were a top 3 DVOA special teams unit pretty much all year. Top 5 or top 6 or 7 at worst, but I think a significant part, they were top 3. I know around the Chargers game, they were top 3 because I remember the Chargers being the worst. And I remember in comparison, I wanted to see what the Bills were in juxtaposition, and the Bills were, I believe, 3rd for that game. So Bills have a good special teams unit. Again, they have good guys who just do special teams. Taiwan Jones and Saran Neal and even Jaquan Johnson, they're good at special teams. I don't want to put Jaquan Johnson in the realm of Taiwan and Saran Neal, but we do good things on special teams. We've got good coaching with Heath Farwell. We've got quality guys on special teams. Coach McDermott preaches the importance of special teams all the time. You add in the kicking game. Awesome comment here from Ron. Yeah, Sal Capaccio on the Cover One Buffalo podcast last night mentioned that Bass hasn't missed a kick yet. He reached out to other Buffalo media members to confirm that he wasn't crazy on that, and he was not crazy on that. So yeah, Bass hasn't missed a kick. Good comment here from Donnybrook. Kumaro is good on special teams too, and we're going to talk about Jay Kumaro in a little bit. Yeah, the Bills have a quality special teams unit. The Bills are solid in all 3 phases, and I would expect that to continue. Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott both view special teams as an important piece of the game, and it should be. You know, it's corny or as jokey as it sounds. You know, special teams is 1/3 of the game. It's very important. And if you have horrible special teams, if you have bad punting or bad kicking or bad coverage units, it can really hurt you and bite you. Nobody wants that. And so I think McDermott and co put a lot of focus on special teams. Again, it's the reason why they roster special teams specific players like Taiwan Jones and like Andre Roberts last year. So it's an important part of the game, and I would expect it to continue to be an important part of the game, and expect the Bills special teams to continue to shine as their offense will this year, hopefully again, and the defense will hopefully again as well. And we had a comment here about Jay Kumaro. That's the next position group here, and we're going to switch to and talk about this year, the wide receiver camp battles. So perhaps one of the biggest takeaways, and not in a good way for me, from being at the open practice last Saturday, was how much I did not notice Isaiah Hodgins. And that also goes hand in hand. Again, there had only been a couple practices leading up to that, but you didn't hear anything about Isaiah Hodgins leading into the open practice. We really haven't heard much of him all training camp other than that bomb that he caught where he beat Dane Jackson, and then he got the bomb thrown to him by Mitch Trubisky, which was a really nice route and a really nice catch. I know a lot of the clips that were shown were just him catching it and scoring, but you see him adjust to the ball in mid as it's starting to come down. He makes a nice adjustment with his shoulders and cradles it really nice. So it was a good play to see from him. But other than that, you really haven't seen or heard a lot from Isaiah Hodgins. I know he was a darling of mine going into training camp, and he was for a lot of people as well. A lot of people expected him to be one of the 5 or 6 receivers that made this team. But the receivers that we keep hearing a ton about, we're going to get into why potentially. The receivers that we keep hearing a ton about are Jay Kumaro and, you already beat me to the punch here, Michael Lucas, I'm sorry, I read that fast. I don't even know why I have my glasses on if I can't read things. Great comment here from Michael Lucas. Having guys like Kumaro for wide receiver 5/6 that can play special teams and contribute on O or D will help you keep 10 defensive linemen. I literally have that in my notes, and I love where your head is at. We're going to start to get that in a minute. Great call, great point. And I'm not just saying that because you agree with me. I think that's actually a smart point. And not just because I have it written down. But Jay Kumaro keeps getting rave reviews every day in practice. He was in matched up one-on-ones with Tre'Davious White, and White was in good coverage, but Kumaro would win and just come down with catches. Granted, there were some greater pinpoint throws from Josh Allen, but all we keep hearing about is Jay Kumaro, Jay Kumaro, Jay Kumaro, Jay Kumaro. Several media members are convinced at this point that Jay Kumaro is going to be wide receiver 5 or wide receiver 6. Same thing with Isaiah Mckenzie, who is just shining when it comes to the receiver position. And I will say, from the open practice last week, I was very impressed with Isaiah Mckenzie. One in the return game, and all the reports are so far coming out of camp that his return game situation in terms of the dropsies and the fumbles, he has not had that. And in the open practice, that those stories were corroborated. He looked very good in his decision making. I loved watching the punt return and kick return drills that they were doing. They started off practice with a couple good ones to test, judgment and coming down with the ball and everything they were doing. Greg Thompson tweeted out multiple videos of that, so go and check that check those videos out that he put out last Saturday from the open practice. But Mckenzie looked comfortable back there. He looked good with his decision making. He looked confident and cool and calm and collected with his hands and just making good decisions like you would hope a veteran and someone with his talent level would. But the offensive aspect from Mckenzie is what I was more encouraged with. We've seen him do gadgetry stuff last year and we've seen him score touchdowns. And then we've heard some of those reports of he's picked up route running nuance from Cole Beasley and Beasley's kind of mentored him when it comes to the route running things. And man, the route running from Isaiah Mckenzie, you heard it in reports in camp and then seeing it in person last Saturday, he looks crisp. He looks sharp. He looks fast as he has been for a while. What was also interesting in the open practice last Saturday, Diggs did not practice. And then Manny Sands came down with a knock, I think roughly midway of practice, got worked on the sidelines a little bit, came back onto the field, but without his helmet, didn't finish the rest of practice. And so you had two of your top three receivers out. So Jay Kumaro was running with the ones a lot. Isaiah Mckenzie was running with the ones a lot, especially because, they'd start to take Beasley off a little bit because he doesn't need to get too much burn. Mckenzie's looked really good. Really, really, really good. And Kumaro has looked good as well. I would say I wasn't as impressed with Kumaro in person as I was Isaiah Mckenzie. But that being said, Kumaro still had some nice catches. He's come down with a lot of good balls and a lot of good plays so far in camp. He did in the open practice, and he's done so, a lot almost every day. And where is that? There. Appreciate you, Anthony, saying hit that like button. I didn't mention it in the lead in, probably because I hate it because I feel corny and like I'm showing out for it. But yes, all of the likes for these videos, whether it's on YouTube or any of the podcasting platforms, all the likes, the subscriptions, the downloads, obviously, those go a long way towards helping us to trend and track for eyes and ears of anyone and everyone, whether it's Bills Mafia or not. So please rate, review, and subscribe. It means a lot to me and to the Cover One team, more than you know. So I appreciate that, Anthony. Thank you very much. But, the Kumaro, and I know a couple of you guys have already mentioned some of the comments. The Kumaro noise is real easy, is real interesting. You see what Aaron Rodgers said about Kumaro, and then it seemed like that almost kind of shined an interesting spotlight. And then it seems like the media is just all focused on Jake Kumaro all the time. Everything he does just seems to be immaculate, whether it is or isn't. It's just being covered and pumped and covered and pumped, and a light is shown upon him. Whether they're trying to do it to pump him up for a trade or whether it's very legitimate and Jake Kumaro, the wide receiver, is a very real thing, we're going to see as we move forward. I'm very interested now. Again, I came away from the open practice more impressed with Mckenzie than I did Kumaro, but I still thought Kumaro looked good. But now, going into these preseason games, this wide receiver competition is going to be intense. We know who the front four, the top four locks are. We know Diggs, we know Manny Sands, we know Beasley, we know Gabriel Davis, but everything after that was almost an open competition. And Kumaro and Mckenzie seem to be, from all reports, the front runners now. But man, the preseason aspect is going to go so far in determining who makes the team and who sees these snaps. And as Michael Lucas mentioned earlier, I love the idea, we've spoken about it several times on the show, the idea of having quality special teamers that are also guys who see snaps on offense and defense. My ideal scenario, I wanted Isaiah Mckenzie to win the kick return and the punt return battle because I knew he could be wide receiver 5 or wide receiver 6. So that means you have a receiver and a kick returner and a punt returner all in one roster spot. That'd be tremendous. We know how good Jay Kumaro is on special teams in multiple phases. So if he's wide receiver 5 or wide receiver 6, and he's also contributing meaningful special team snaps, that means you have a special teamer and a wide receiver in one spot. And that allows you, as Michael mentioned earlier, and like I have in my notes here, that allows you to keep 10 defensive linemen, or maybe that allows you to keep an extra linebacker or an extra corner or an extra anything, because you are able to condense multiple roster spots into one player. It's a very ideal scenario if Kumaro and Mckenzie are the truth and can be wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6. I will say that. One of the knocks on Isaiah Hodgins that we mentioned in terms of that would be a hurdle towards him making this team was that he does not really a special teams guy. He hasn't really seen a lot of special team snaps throughout his college career and obviously in his NFL career because he didn't really have one in 2020. So that's something that's not going to be advantageous to him in making the Bills team. It's almost going to, if he makes it, it's purely because of wide receiver ability. That's it. If he's making a team and he's wide receiver 6, he's pretty much just going to be a wide receiver. You're not seeing a lot of special team snaps unless he's doing something that we're not seeing. And as of Saturday, granted, it's only one open practice again, but I didn't see a lot from him special teams wise that made me think, oh man, Hodgins can play special teams. So not as much. But Kumaro and Mckenzie both shining offensively to the point that they could make the team as wide receivers, knowing that they have the ability to play special teams. Again, it saves roster spots. That allows you to keep more players, continue to round out your roster and maintain depth. So I don't want to say it's a best case scenario that Kumaro and Mckenzie win the wide receiver 5 and wide receiver 6 spots, but it is a very, very interesting thing because if they do, again, you got guys who can contribute on offense and who can contribute on special teams. And anytime you're saving roster spots, that's a very good thing. And that's a very good thing for the Buffalo Bills. And that's something that I don't want to say we should root for, but would be a nice little thing to keep an eye on as we move forward. And it's probably the more sexy battle or thing to watch when it comes to the preseason games because it's easier to see wide receivers do well than it is defensive linemen unless they're just coming up with sacks every now and again. But these first two positions that we've spoken about are going to be on display and easy to see right out of the gate in the preseason. The defensive line and the wide receivers, who's getting the ball thrown their way, what their routes are looking like, how much separation they're getting, catches, receptions, touchdowns, yards after catch, all those things. We're going to be able to readily see who's bringing what and how accurate these camp reports are once the preseason starts really turning up and getting kicking. And I wanted to bring up, there's Nick commenting. Yeah, Heath Farwell was saying Wild Goose has been getting in some gunner work. He did a lot in the special teams drills when they started doing the gunner stuff. And granted, you had a lot of guys like mixing in, but Wild Goose was getting himself as many snaps and reps as he could at the gunner spot. I don't think he looked. That's also one thing, I want to mention as well. Saron Neal is such a good gunner in those gunner reps and drills. He was just getting around both guys blocking him almost every single time, whether he split them or got around inside, outside, whatever. He is a legit gunner, and it was very impressive. And he was also coaching up some of the young guys in that drill as well to show them how to get around blocks and get downfield easily. So it would be a cool thing if Wild Goose could contribute on special teams because I want to see him make this team because I love his name and I want him to do good so I can get a jersey that says Wild Goose on it. Comment there from Ron. It's the best case to have Kumaro and Mckenzie make the rosters 5 and 6. Kumaro can help in the red zone too. That's also a fair point. He's huge. He's got long, golden, brown locks that look luscious and well moisturized and healthy. I know the hair probably doesn't help him on the football field, but it does look majestic and make him look majestic when he runs. So, but he is a very large man and could be a red zone threat. And we know what Mckenzie can do in the red zone and a gadget guy as well. So that's also a good, interesting point. And these are the part with training camp reports. And this is why preseason football is going to matter even more. We see the comment here from Griff. Training camp reports are fun, but I remember how good Peterman looked in camp / the preseason. Yeah, pour one out for Nathan Peterman. He looked really good in camp. And he looked kind of decent in the preseason too, but not so much once, live action in the regular season took off. And even in the preseason too, he didn't look great. But yeah, it's going to be a big thing to see who... I like this comment for Kumaro. I hope Kumaro makes the team so I can switch him to tight end in Madden. That would probably work. Madden has fallen so far. That's a lot. I can't even open that can of worms. That'd be a rabbit hole that I don't think I would come out of for 4 or 5 hours if we started talking about Madden. But yeah, that wide receiver battle is just getting so much talk. The competition is getting so much coverage every day from the media, and it was fun to see in person last Saturday, and it's something that we need to keep an eye on in the preseason. And just to mention several other guys who've stood out so far in camp and who stood out to me last Saturday at the open practice, Matt Breida, his speed is super legit. I forget which players were. Oh, I think Sal said it was Zack Moss and Brian Dable when they were both asked independently of one another about Matt Breida. They just said speed. Um, he he gets the corner almost at will. Even when it looks like there's no edge and no corner, he gets to it. He is a very fast human, which we already knew. I think 2 or 3 of the top 5 speeds in terms of miles per hour reached over the last several seasons. Breida has 2 of the or 3 of the top 5. He's legit fast, and he adds an element to this team that we have not seen from the backfield. Motor and Moss are both quicker than they are fast, but they're not burners. They're not home run threats. Matt Breida is. He gets the corner at will. He gets the edge at will. He turns. He gets upfield. He's more elusive than I think people gave him credit for. It was nice to see him in that open practice, and I'm excited to see him in the preseason as well. I still love the addition of him. I wanted just to see an element or a dynamic in the Bills' backfield that they didn't have already. They didn't have that home run threat. They didn't have that long speed. They didn't have that kind of burst. Oof. Matt Breida is real. Question here from Griff. I'm assuming you're still talking about Breida. How is he at pass blocking and catching? Catching, I don't think he's bad. I'm not going to sit here and say that he's, again, in an ideal world, despite the fact that I wanted long speed, I wanted James White signed to the Buffalo Bills in the offseason. So just to use that as a comparison, which isn't really fair to anybody to do comps like that, but I don't think he's as good of a receiver as James White, or as good of a pass blocker. Even just to compare with the guys on the roster now, I think Zack Moss is the best pass blocking of the 3. I think his pass blocking is super underrated. Zack Moss is the best pass blocker from the running back position, and the best catcher, that works even though this isn't baseball. It's probably Breida. Zack Moss is still close though. I think Zack Moss's receiving abilities are underrated, but it could be a toss-up between him and Breida. Pass blocking, I'm going to say he's not bad, but Zack Moss is a better pass blocker than Matt Breida is. I don't think Breida is deficient at pass blocking, but I'd rather have Moss in pass pro than I would Breida. And I think he's definitely serviceable at catching the ball, especially in the screen game and in jet sweeps and little gadgetry as a Mckenzie type things, whether it's a screen coming from the slot or out of the backfield, or, running those play actions and the running back just makes it look like it's like a zone outside and then just keeps going and kind of flares out to the outside, especially for the short yardage and goal line type work. He succeeds at that a lot. So that'll be sweet. And hell yeah, Griff, Moss did obliterate him. Oh, Moss is crazy good at pass blocking. Thanks to your breakdown. If you're referring to the video I did when I broke down the pass pro of Moss on Bosa and some other work that Eric Turner and I did in the film room, I really appreciate that shout out. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Ooh, Daniel here, a different thought. In my opinion, Singletary is better at pass protection. Okay, that's fair. I'd love to know why you think that. I firmly believe Moss is a better pass blocker than Singletary. Not that Singletary's bad. I just think Moss is much better at it, but teach his own. And I'd love to know why you think so. Comment there from Ron. I think Singletary, Moss, and Breida is a nice backfield. I agree. I think any backfield, you want to have that dynamic aspect. You want to have guys that can kind of, the old thunder and lightning adage type thing. You don't want to have 3 of the same type of player. I think Breida rounds out that group nicely and adds another piece. Moss and Singletary are already a little similar, even though they're still different. But Breida really adds a whole, different aspect and piece. So for sure. How dare you, Griff? Hey, Anthony is good, but I don't think you can credit him for Moss's pass blocking. Nope, you definitely can. I taught him everything he knows. Everything that Zack Moss does in pass protection is because of me. And the only reason people know about it is also because of me. So how dare you? But yeah, Breida has looked real fast. Again, as advertised, seeing him in person with that speed is great. I'm excited to see it in the preseason. So Breida's speed was nice to see. And I started talking about Zack Moss just because of the questions, but Zack Moss looked really good in the open practice on Saturday. One of the videos I tweeted out was a really nice run that Moss had. Granted, it's kind of just touch and rough touch and nobody's tackling anything like that, but he had a real nice cut. Was kind of an outside zone, cut back inside that if there were pads on, he was definitely making Dane Jackson miss. Got to the second level, got to the third level really quickly. So good to see him coming off the injuries, nice and strong. And, he was non-contact for a majority of the offseason, but now he's ready and raring to go. He looked good. He looked good in the open practice. That was good to see. I spoke about Saran Neal a little bit already. Really good in special teams, as we already should know. He's a special teams ace. He's been making this team the last several years because of special teams. He looked really good in the gunner drills, but he looked really good in coverage. This was something that multiple reporters had mentioned leading up to the open practice, just how good Saran Neal looked and how smart and savvy he was in coverage. And he definitely was at the open practice on Saturday. We've known about his athleticism and what he was physically, but it just seemed like the mental side of the game and like the understanding of the game really started to click for Saran Neal. He was leveraging coverage very well. He was understanding his responsibility. He was using the sideline as a defender, spacing out patterns very well, pattern recognition, just jumping routes, staying step for step with guys. I was very, very, very impressed with Saran Neal, as I was Damar Hamlin. Not as much as Saran Neal, but Hamlin had several reps where just, one rep, for example, both receivers to his side, both the slot receiver and the outside receiver both ran slants, and he was maintaining his own coverage. So he had number 2 and he walked with number 2 inside and then passed off number 2 perfectly to his linebacker help and then kicked back outside to take away number 1, to the point where Trubisky had to double clutch and then the rush started to get to him. So he had to find somewhere else to throw, went over the middle of the field and it almost got picked off. Hamlin looked really good in zone coverage. Again, as advertised, he was somebody whose film I grinded a lot leading up to the draft and even more so after the Bills took him. And, he comes from a pro-ready defense at Pitt and he looked really good in zone coverage. He was impressive. As well, for sure. I liked Damar Hamlin a lot. And now I want to start to and then I also wanted to finish on that thought as well. The safety combinations at open practice were interesting. We keep talking about the depth aspect of safety and how it's Hyde and Poyer and then a whole bunch of question marks. And I think the assumption for a lot of people is that it'll be Jaquan Johnson and Damar Hamlin. They didn't get work together in the open practice. The backup safety groupings were Damar Hamlin and Tariq Thompson, undrafted free agent. And then the other safety combination was Jaquan Johnson and Josh Thomas. They were 98% sure that they were exclusively running in those teams. So we didn't see a Hamlin and Jaquan Johnson tandem, which I thought was very interesting, especially considering, again, the safety spots, the backup safety spots are pretty much an open competition. Jaquan Johnson is the incumbent and has been making this team, but really more because of special teams, not because of actual defensive snaps. So seeing who that next man up at safety is to take those Dean Marlowe snaps and that Dean Marlowe role is a very interesting one as well. And I'm very excited to see that. Ooh, comment here from Nick. We'll go from there. Which rookie looked the best besides Boogie and Groot? Spencer Brown is very, very, very athletic. The technique isn't there yet, but he's very, 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 very athletic and big, and he was fun to see. I actually liked, I don't want to go too far off the reservation here, but Quentin Morris, the undrafted free agent tight end, looked really good. I liked a couple snaps I saw from Elijah Griffin as well. But if I had to pinpoint, probably Spencer Brown. Just he's so physically impressive and athletic that you're just kind of drawn to him like initially and almost immediately. And even within that too, I know you said besides Boogie and Groot, I noticed Gregory Rousseau much more than I did Carlos Basham. I think I had to focus more to see Carlos Basham, whereas Rousseau just kind of kept splashing and flashing and doing things that made me consistently notice him pretty regularly. But good question there. Going through questions. I'm seeing a lot of talk about the Singletary Moss debate of who's the better pass blocker. Yeah, Singletary's not bad. I think Singletary's fine in pass protection. I just prefer Moss. But he's not bad at it. What else? Anybody trying to get any last minute questions, thoughts, comments, concerns? Feel free to start getting those in. Awesome comment here from Kevin. Love the diversity of skill set in our running backs. Yeah, that's a big thing. You have to be able to keep defenses off balance, and you do that by having multiple weapons in your arsenal. And that's a good way to go. Oh, another comment. There's the question I saw earlier from Kevin. Will there be more ball distribution for the tight end core? Jacob Hollister has been hurt and hasn't played a lot. They love Dawson Knox. So I think Knox is going to see the lion's share of snaps when it comes to tight end. And also within that, I don't see the Bills running a ton of 12 personnel to the point that another tight end might make an impact receiving wise. That being said, I like Jacob Hollister, and I think he's an interesting piece at tight end, as is Tommy Sweeney actually as well. But I think this is Dawson Knox's position to lose. I know there were all the Ertz rumors, and the Bills were kicking the tires on Ertz, and maybe we're going to get him, and then weren't. We kept seeing all those reports that, Ertz to Buffalo, and then it was like nothing for a month, and then it'd be Ertz to Buffalo again, and then nothing for a month. But I think Dawson Knox still, when it comes to targets and receptions, I think Dawson Knox gets the heavy lion's share. Maybe you'll see some Hollister in there here and there, or maybe even some Spencer Brown in the Lee Smith role, but I still think Dawson Knox, they love him there. He's athletic. He's looked good. I know he had a drop the other day. I think everybody's so mercurial on Dawson Knox that he's either amazing because he had a touchdown catch, or he's terrible and trash because he dropped a touchdown catch, all over the place. But I still think Knox sees the lion's share there. Good question. Feel free to start getting those questions. And Obata has looked very good so far. And question here from Ron. How is the offensive line? Look, I haven't seen a lot of info about the O-line except for Hart getting beat like a drum. Any O-line standouts? It's interesting that you bring that up. The O-line shuffled around a lot, with the injuries to Feliciano, and then Dawkins and Bodker being out with COVID, and then Forrest Lamp being hurt. All this kind of hodgepodge looking stuff, but I liked Cody Ford from what I did see, although it was like mainly limited. Mitch Morris's movability and athleticism still looks good, although he did Morse. I don't think it was much of Morse failing as it was Ed Oliver making a great play. Morse got owned by Ed Oliver on one play, but I think it was just he beat him to the spot, and Ed Oliver got a good spot. I liked Ford, but I haven't really seen a ton that's like flashing and showing, oh man, this person's great. Oh, this person's like this. It's been pretty kind of just, I don't want to say par for the course, but par for the course at this part. I'm really focused on what the preseason snaps look like, especially since I believe I mentioned it last episode or the episode before, what Brandon Beane said about Cody Ford and the fact that Cody Ford would get work at both guard spots. I still find that very interesting, especially after he led off with saying, we bounced Cody Ford around in multiple positions, and that's a hard thing to do and a hard thing to get acclimated with, and so I expected after that Beane to say, like, that's why he's going to get looks at this position, but he followed it up with, and that being said, we're going to try him out at both guard spots. So that's something to keep an eye on, and especially too seeing as guys are just now starting to come back. Feliciano working back in, Lamp working back in, Dawkins and Bodker will work back in. That's really something interesting to keep an eye on. But yeah, Bobby Hart got beat a lot, especially at left tackle. It was bad. It was real bad. Oh, shout out there to Apex, who also answered Ron. Yeah, Ford is reported doing really good. Not much other than that right now. Yep, that's fair. I second that notion. Oh, question from Anthony Perello. How is Taryn Johnson doing? Has the switch flipped for good? You know what? I don't want to sit up here in line and be like, oh, yeah, he's looked great, or oh, yeah, he's looked bad. I didn't really notice him in the open practice. Granted, I wasn't really watching for him. I think at this point, Taryn Johnson, I think we know what he is. And I think when it terms that, has the switch flipped for good, I think it depends on how you're viewing the switch and what the switch is being flipped for and in what scenario. I don't think he's ever going to be a great man-to-man corner. I don't think he's going to be great against dudes with blinding speed. I think he's a strong slot nickel corner who's better in zone than he is man, and he's tremendous coming forward and filling rush lanes and run gaps and strong with his run fits, and he's as good of a nickel corner that also plays like a third linebacker as there is in the NFL. I think that switch has been flipped, but I still think we're going to see him. That's why I want to answer it that way. Like, I don't want you to think like, has a switch flipped for good? Yeah, definitely. And then he gets matched up in man coverage and gets beat real bad. I don't think he's ever going to be the strongest man coverage corner. He's not built that way. And he doesn't have the speed for it, but he's a good, solid nickel corner in today's NFL, but he's better in zone and he's tremendous coming forward and playing with that physical edge, whether it's, forcing plays back inside, spilling it outside, or coming up and making the tackle and playing like a linebacker. Oh, yep. Michael was there. He knows. He was watching the hog mollies in the trenches nonstop at the open practice last Saturday. Yeah, that Michael's talking about the play where Oliver got inside of Morse and blew up a run in the backfield. Yeah, that Oliver play was gross. His quickness can be a killer. That's what the hope is. Now that Starr is back, playing that one tack, wearing that one tack hat, Ed Oliver gets to go back to his natural position, and we get to see some of that quickness and that hand technique and that extension and that speed to power conversion. We should see big plays from Ed Oliver this year, and I'm hoping that brief glimpse that we saw last Saturday was just the start of it. Here we go. Comment here from 13. I'm so late. I'll have to watch the recording. Yes, you will. You are tremendously late, and we will never forgive you. No, just kidding. Thank you for being here. What else do we got? Question here from T Dobbs, or comment here, I guess. I can't see the Bills cutting any young drafted defensive ends, so I feel Jerry Hughes is going to be the odd man out. I don't see Jerry Hughes being cut. I really don't. I think the Bills keep 6 defensive ends. I think it's Jerry Hughes, Mario Addison, AJ Epinesa, Gregory Rousseau, Carlos Basham, and F.A. Obata. I think the Bills keep 9 defensive linemen, but I honestly think 10 is a very realistic possibility. I think they could keep 4 defensive tackles. I really feel that they're going to, Starr and Jerry are obviously locks. Everyone else, the reports have been interesting. Apparently, Justin Zimmer has been crushing it at defensive tackle. Harrison Phillips, not so much. Vernon Butler, you're still not hearing anything about, but Vernon Butler restructuring his contract, I feel like that was still a little bit of a handshake type of deal where it was like, hey, do this for us. We're bringing you back. You're going to make the team. So it's going to be interesting. But I don't see, and I've gotten it from some people, and I can see where it comes from. I don't see Jerry Hughes getting cut. I think he means too much to this team. And again, at the end of the day, granted, potential can weigh out, all these things. But right now, like proven pass rusher, and when I say proven, I mean production and consistency and sustainability, Jerry Hughes is the best pass rusher on this Buffalo Bills team right now. You might be able to think like, okay, Gregory Rousseau is going to be better this year in 2021, or Addison's going to be better, or AJ Epinesa, or Ed Oliver's going to be our best pass rusher, all these things, whatever. Jerry Hughes is still right now our best proven pass rusher. Anything else is just based on hope or projection, and those aren't guarantees. Right now, Jerry Hughes is our best proven, reliable pass rusher on this team. I don't see him getting cut, but I've seen that echoed from several people thinking that he could get cut. And I know some people are coming in the comments here and saying like, he's not getting cut. He's not getting cut. There's a decent amount of people who are voicing that statement. Same thing with Mario Addison as well. So I get where you're coming from, T Dobbs. I can understand why you would say that. I just don't think he gets cut. But especially too, I think more of, if we're at this point next year, I think it's a much different thing of like, do the Bills bring him back if the young guy, like, what does the defensive end room look like next year if Epinesa, Rousseau, and Basham take the leaps and the jumps that they ideally do in 2021. What the defensive end room looks like next year is very much up for debate in terms of who they bring back and what deals and, how does that room look. But as of right now, I still think, Hughes is the guy. Granted, there's more camp and more footage in preseason for the coaching staff and the front office this year than there was last year. But I mean, we saw the Bills really keep Trent Murphy because AJ Epinesa wasn't ready and they didn't want to throw anybody into the fire. They like leadership. They like that production. And Jerry Hughes is much better than Trent Murphy. So I see him staying around. Question here from Nick as we start to wind down here on this episode of Disguise Coverage. What about the linebacker depth? Are we in trouble again if we lose Trey or Milano? Yes, I think we're in trouble. I'm not terribly against the rest of the linebackers, and some of them have had some really nice reports. Giles Harris made a couple plays. Dodson has looked good. I know Sal Capaccio really likes Andre Smith and thinks he could be a dark horse to make the roster. But even on like their best days, if Trey or Milano go down, our defense is in trouble. I don't think it's, DEFCON 5, we're screwed, hide the kids, hide the wife type of thing. But yeah, if Trey or Milano go down, we're in trouble. I think we might be able to mitigate that loss a little bit, and being able to kind of patch it together between AJ Klein and whoever else they, platoon with, or two of the other guys and platoon different things. But yeah, I still think if I like the linebacker depth more than I did last year, but if we lose Trey or Milano, I still think we're in trouble. Not as much as last year, but still not great. Question here from Ron. Who is your sleeper guy to make the roster that isn't on most radars? I don't know who's on people's radars and who's my I tell you, I guess like this isn't like a fair way to answer the question. I guess my sleeper guy to make the roster, I'm going to kind of extend it. I think Damar Hamlin does very well for the Buffalo Bills in his career. I think Damar Hamlin makes the roster. I think Damar Hamlin occupies that third safety type role by the end of this year and starting to go into next. And I think depending on what happens with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, I think you see Damar Hamlin get a second contract. And I don't know if that's necessarily being talked about at this point of how well he could potentially be. I think Damar Hamlin is somebody who could really show out. So he's my, I guess, kind of sleeper guy. Also, Quentin Morris. I guess we really don't go true sleeper. I really liked what I saw from him on Saturday. And granted, I don't want to say the tight end room is easy access, but it's not the hardest position grouping for someone to make a splash in and see significant snaps. So Morris would also be up there as well. Where else? What else? Do we have any other questions, thoughts, comments, concerns? Yeah, Zimmer. I would rather have Zimmer than Butler. I recognize Butler's size. I just don't think his production is there. But I just, for some reason, feel like he's going to make the team. I don't know why. I just think he's going to make the team, unless he's god awful or someone else is just so great. I think Butler is going to make the team. I don't know why. I just have like a feeling about it. Tyrell Adams has been doing well and making some noise. I see the comments coming through. One from Apex saying he's really good, and the comment here from Ron Beck that I think Adams will make the roster. Yeah, I've heard good things. Not to be unfair, but I didn't really focus a ton on him at the open practice, and I've only read things on him, but the reports have been decently good enough. I know the stats are very interesting with his tackling percentage and total tackles and everything the last several years, especially last year. So it's good to have that competition. I'm fine with anything. The linebacker depth is also a very interesting one. Who makes it behind Trey and Milano? I think AJ Klein is a lock. I think next year, contract-wise, he could be dropped. It would make more sense. But it's going to be very interesting for sure with the rest of this grouping. Where else? Anything else? Bass, if your question is, I see Bass with a question mark. If you're meaning like, what is he doing? Very good. He apparently hasn't missed a kick all of camp. So I think that might be a pretty good thing. Oh, this is a very, sorry, comments jumped on me. Comment here from Ron. I think they're going to try and sneak Bam on the practice squad. That way they can call him up. Daryl Johnson's really good at special teams. I know they've gotten him work actually at defensive end. He's seen like legit game snaps at defensive end, but he is more of a special teamer, as we all know, than defensive end. That would be sweet if they could sneak him on. I don't know how realistic that is. I still feel like he's outside looking in unless something drastic happens, but it's going to be tough. It is going to be tough. What else? I think that's pretty much everything as we start to. I'm going to throw up the toodles, you guys. Means we're starting to say goodbye and starting to go down, but I am going to go back to the comments one more time just to make sure everything. Nick, you said, are you going to the scrimmage? If you mean this Saturday's thing, no, I'm not. I wanted to, but all the tickets are gone. And then people are reselling them online, the free tickets, which is really disappointing. I'm not going this Saturday, but I am going September 1st, so I'm very excited for that. I appreciate you, Ron. You have a good night. Your engagement and interaction was awesome. I loved your questions and thoughts and everything you brought to the episode. So I appreciate you, Ron. Enjoy your night. Comment here from Michael Lucas, who I know is a trenches guy. I've been disappointed with the lack of Bam's development at defensive end. I mean, he's a late round pick, and he's somebody who you hope can take the next step. I think it's very similar to Dane Jackson. You know, the idea that you've got this like diamond in the rough late guy who shows a couple flashes and you think, oh my God, this guy could be somebody. This guy could be the next like thing. And then he kind of doesn't pan out. I feel like we maybe overset expectations for Daryl Johnson. But I mean, he's been good on special teams. Not everybody pans out. Everybody's got to carve out a role. He carved out a special teams role, but with the depth we have at defensive end now, he might not be good enough at that spot to really have a solid position there. I appreciate you, Apex, who said, thanks, Ant. Great show tonight. I appreciate you. Thank you for stopping by. You, again, were another one who awesome in the chat. Always a ton of energy. I really appreciate you as well. Oh, man, I was going to go back to more comments, but now, because, I just love the affirmation, I'm going to keep throwing these up. Nick saying, thanks. Great show. You're always very good about the chat. Keep up the good work, buddy. I appreciate you, Nick. Thank you so much. Anthony Perello, amazing name, Anthony. I'm probably biased, but amazing first name. So I knew you'd have a great comment here. He said, always a fun show. Great job. I appreciate you. I'm going to throw up this from Nick here as we start to ride out, who said, don't forget to hit the like on the way out. And then he threw up many, 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 many thumbs. I appreciate you. 13 with the same thing, saying smash the likes. Griff with the comment, great show. The best part is when you put my comments up. Yeah, I mean, I put up good comments and you tend to have some good ones, so you've earned it. Oh, awesome comment from Kevin. Thanks. Always informative. This genuinely warms my heart. And I'm going to move the likes comment. I'm going to leave this up. Thanks. Always informative. I always learn from your podcast. That tremendously warms my heart. I aim to try and make everything, especially as we get towards the season and there's tape and analytics and all these things, I always try to make everything as informative as possible. And I also think it's kind of not the unofficial mission statement of Cover One, but I think that's what I appreciate most about being part of the Cover One team. There is just so much talent that will teach you something. And it's impossible to not listen to Eric Turner or watch one of his film breakdowns, especially myself being able to be part of him for a lot of Film Room episodes last year. Just how smart he is and how much he knows. And you just learn and become a better analyst and fan by listening to him. Same thing with listening to Greg and Aaron and the guys of the Huff. And then, Rob and Kyle now on the roundup. There's something for everyone, but the overarching theme behind everything is to be informative and help everyone understand the game more and be able to watch it from a different perspective and be more informed to enjoy the game more and love it even more and understand it even further. So I appreciate you, Kevin. That's awesome. And hell yeah, Michael, I appreciate you too. He said, good show. Glad to catch it live and meet you at the open practice. That was fantastic. I guess Twitter and social media became real life when Michael and I met at the open practice on Saturday. But unfortunately, once the regular season starts, Michael, you and I, as you know, are in the same Dynasty Fantasy Football League. And thus you and I are both blood enemies once the season starts. But as of right now, we're good friends and I appreciate you. But once the season starts, yeah, you and I are going to fight to the death. Appreciate everyone going in the chat. Going in the chat. That's everything. I'm going to leave up Kevin's comment because again, this one really warms my heart. No disrespect to anyone else's. I appreciate everyone's love and support. And that's going to start to do it for us. I see you, Michael. Bring it in all caps. It's very good. I appreciate everybody, as always, for riding with me live on this episode of Disguise Coverage. I thought this was going to be a short one tonight, but I don't know why I ever think that. It pretty much goes at least an hour every week, kind of to an hour and a half. And it's going to get even more intense as we ramp up towards the season. We're a few short weeks, several short weeks away from real regular season football. We've got preseason football starting next week for the Bills. I am excited to really start getting into preseason film and tape and games and breaking things down and having numbers and metrics and plays and examples for further analysis, further breakdowns, anything and everything for you guys as we start to go forward. And you guys make it all worth it. Again, thank you to everyone for riding with me live on this episode. Everyone in the chat was tremendous tonight. I say it every week. I love doing the live shows because I love the live engagement in the chat and the back and forth and the dynamic and the banter. And honestly, it would be pretty sad and lonely if I was here live and there was nobody in the chat to engage with. So I appreciate you guys more than you possibly know. And if you are listening to this later, watching this later, whatever platform you are using to watch or listen to Disguise Coverage, thank you so much for, I need to put this up. The week one disguise coverage may reach 3 hours. Ooh, 3 hours might be selling it short. Week one disguise coverage might be draft night one scenario where we went for like 6 hours. So everybody get some Gatorades. Everybody get yourself, maybe you can just skip the Gatorade. Just get yourself some, IV drips ready and just hook up and get ready because we're going to go for some marathon sessions once the season starts. But yeah, if you are watching this later, listening to this later, whatever. Thank you so much for your listen, your download, whatever have you. Thank you for liking, subscribing, reviewing. I appreciate every single ounce of, again, support, like, listen, download, word of mouth, positive thing. Even if you tell somebody, hey, like you like the Bills or you like football, you should check out Disguise Coverage because this show is awesome. Or on the opposite foot, maybe you think this show sucks and you have an enemy who you hate and you want to make his life a living hell. So you're like, hey, so-and-so, you should check this out because you're hoping that it's going to make his life miserable. But at the end of the day, it's still a listen and a download, and any press is good press, I guess. So I appreciate you for that as well. I appreciate everyone. I see the comment from Griff at the bottom there saying disguise coverage watch along. That would be very interesting. I don't know what the legality aspect is from a game standpoint. I know we did it during the draft, kind of. But if we did a watch along where I guess I was watching the game and live reacting, that might be something to. I don't know how it goes with my superstition of not texting or tweeting or answering phone calls or making phone calls during Bills games, but that's something to keep on the horizon. I'm going to make a note of that. I appreciate you, Griff. I appreciate everyone. Thank you so much for anything and everything. Again, I appreciate you guys more than you know. Thank you for everything tonight and everything as always. Follow me on the old Twitter, again, at pro__ant. That's pro, 2 underscores ANT. If you missed the beginning of the show, give me a follow on Twitter, but if you don't want to give me a follow, that's fine. As a substitute, I'll accept any one of the 7 Dragon Balls. So whichever is easier for you to give, I'm all about that. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you as always. I will be back next week as we start to ramp up for preseason Bills football and real NFL action. Thank you guys so much. Please leave a like on your way out. I know it sounds corny, but it's tremendously helpful. Please rate and review and subscribe to Disguise Coverage and subscribe to Cover One. Give me a follow on the old Twitter. Be good and kind to others and to yourself. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones all stay safe and are all doing well. Go Bills, and I'll see you next week.